Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Covenant Eyes podcast. We're so glad to have you joining us for this episode. Today, we've got an amazing guest joining us. We have Carole Leathem joining us. Can you introduce to our guests a little bit about who you are and also your ministry?
Yeah, so I said I'm Carole, and I live in California. I always like to say Carole from California, and my husband and I served in ministry in California for over 35 years. And about 10 years ago, he began to struggle with mental health issues. And at first, we didn't know what it was, and it took maybe about 18 months for it to kind of manifest itself from anxiety to depression, and then he became suicidal and had to go into a psychiatric hospital, and just our whole lives unraveled. So overnight, it was like everything changed. And during the course of the next few years, I started looking for help. I couldn't find practical help. And the church really didn't have conversations about what to do in this situation. And we saw ministry families and friends walk away because they didn't know. Nobody knew how to deal with it. And so I'm pretty stubborn. And so I just started forcing conversations. And finally, I landed on a counselor who was a retired pastor. And he just said, I think God has put you in a place to start these conversations. And then about 4 years ago, a friend said to me, "Why are you still looking for help? You are the most healthy caretaker I've ever met. Why don't you start sharing what you've learned?" And so I wrote a book called Are You Ready to Find Joy When Life Gets Messy? And self-published it, and it has been going crazy. And then a year ago, next month, I started a podcast called The Caretaker's Journey podcast. And my whole goal is to inspire, encourage, and educate and equip caregivers, because there are over 55 million unpaid caretakers in the United States alone. So now my podcast is actually in 19 countries, and my fastest growing listeners are not in the United States. They're in countries like Norway and Russia and the UK. And so God is just opening the world up to the needs of caretakers.
Wow, that's fabulous that you're being able to reach so many across the world. You probably never envisioned that, happening. That's amazing.
No.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what is a caretaker, because I think a lot of us traditionally think of it as someone taking care of someone that's sick, but it's more than that, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about what a caretaker actually is?
So the umbrella of caretaker is all kinds of different things. It can cover a mother caring for a child with special needs. It can be a mother just caring for a child. When my husband began to struggle with mental illness, I didn't understand how many things fall under the umbrella of mental health and mental illness. And as I began to do more and more research, I started to understand that these needs of people who, like me, who live with someone who struggles with anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. Those are three different things that fall under the umbrella of mental health and mental illness. I have so many listeners who are parents of children with special needs, and that is a whole different type of caretaking. But the bottom line is it's someone who is responsible for the daily care of another person. I actually now care for my mom as well, long distance. She's in Wisconsin. I'm in California. My sister, I like to say, is boots on the ground there in Wisconsin. But I take care of so many things from California and then fly in when I can't, when we need to have a face-to-face. And so now I'm caring for my husband, who has mental health issues, who's now developing some health-related issues and has had 5 surgeries in 19 months. And my mom, who's on hospice in Wisconsin. So a caretaker is really a person who is responsible for the welfare of another human being.
Do you think that would also apply to like some of our listeners who maybe are helping to care for their spouse or loved one who has experienced trauma or betrayal trauma and is in counseling and seeking therapy. And I mean, there's a lot packed into that, but would you kind of apply it in that circumstance as well?
Absolutely. And it's so funny because I constantly am telling God, I don't need any more on the job training. And I was raised in a very traumatic childhood. I was raised by an abusive alcoholic father and a narcissistic abusive mother. And so I came into adulthood. I was just writing an article about this a couple of days ago. And I came into adulthood with all of these trunks of trauma and abuse that I wasn't even aware of. And then as I started to work through them and get stronger, my husband, for the first few years of our marriage, really was a caretaker for me in a way as I was going through therapy and healing and trying to figure out, what life looked like on this side of the trauma. And now the tables are completely turned, and I'm now caring for him because he has some trauma that he's never dealt with and some things that he came into his adult life with. And so, yeah, I think it's, if you are responsible for the daily welfare and care, making sure someone gets to an appointment, making sure they take medication, making sure they eat and sleep and if you are that responsible, then you qualify as a caregiver.
Talk to us a little bit about, as a caretaker, what kind of challenges does someone experience, or in their own life? Because as a caretaker, it's got to be very taxing, right? And who's there to take care of you, right? So, talk to us about that a little bit and some of the pitfalls to being a caretaker.
There is a number one. I can actually just hone it right into the number one thing that caretakers need to be aware of, and that is burning out. Okay. Because we can become so involved in caring for someone else that we actually stop taking care of ourselves. And I know that there is a danger for me, because my caretaking is so over the top right now, that I will stop going to the doctor and taking care of my own medical checkups and needs. I will stop going to the gym. I'll stop taking a shower. And burnout is the number one thing. The second most critical thing that we need to be aware of is that caretakers have a tendency to isolate. Depending upon what the caretaking is encompassing in your life, it can be real small, it can be really big, but we have a tendency to isolate. And when we start to isolate, then we start thinking, oh, I'm alone. Right. There's no one to help me. There's no one that cares. And we get into this spinning mindset that there's no one out there and we're just doing this by ourselves, because it is hard to find help. It's hard to find just practical help. And so I think we need to understand that we're not alone, and we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves in practical ways, like getting enough sleep. I tend to, when the overwhelm happens, I tend to not eat right, which affects the way I feel. It affects my mood. It affects my patience. Yes. So we need to really take care of ourselves, and we really need to make a phone call when we start thinking we're by ourselves. Because I have a couple people in my life who I can pick up the phone and go, hey, I'm having a really hard time. And if they're close, they'll be on my doorstep. If they're not, she usually will send me a gift box with a bath bomb, a bag of coffee, a new mug, something just to remind me that I need to take care of myself.
That's amazing. I think that's a great point, because, we need that community around us. Even if it's a small community, you need to have those people around you that can kind of be your strength when you're feeling weak. So I love that. Talk to us a little bit about some of the strategies that you use, when you start to feel that heavy load or that burden and that burnout. What do you do to kind of pump the brakes and take a step back for a minute to ensure that you regain your strength and, that you're able to serve and to help the person that you're caring for?
I do what I call a mini vacation.
Okay.
One day I was having a really hard day, and as a little side note here, my book is very transparent and raw. It comes from a place of truth, because so many times we sugarcoat the story, and I did not do that in my book. So it tends to be kind of a hard read if you're somebody who has been through these types of experiences, but I want people to understand we can have joy. And in the same way, when we get overwhelmed, we can find those moments where we can step aside. So one day I'm having a really bad day, and I'm walking around the house with my cup of coffee. It's early in the morning, and I'm just spitting mad because there's just nothing is going right. I'm not handling my stress. I'm overwhelmed. And I walked by the kitchen, a wall in my dining room, and I looked over and saw this painting. And there's a story behind the painting, but the painting is of a waterfall with a beautiful cabin in a Hawaiian hillside with the water. And I said out loud, I wish I could be there right now. There's a rocking chair on the porch. I just wish I could sit there for 5 minutes. And as I turned to walk away, I went, why can't I? And so I turned back around, and I actually, on my phone, I put my phone in Do Not Disturb. I turned on the sound of a waterfall, and I just stood there drinking my coffee for 5 minutes,
great.
watching this painting and imagining what it would feel like, what it would smell like to be there. It worked. When that 5 minutes was over, I walked away calmer. I walked away with a different attitude. Now I can walk out into the backyard. Well, right now it's cold and there's no flowers. But in the spring and summer, I have flowers and fruit trees and birds. I've planted this garden area so that I can go outside for a few moments and just take a deep breath. It's being proactive. And it's also realizing when you're hitting that wall, you have a choice to make. And sometimes it's stop, take a deep breath, go in a room and close the door, put some music on, do some stretching, lay down on the floor and take a nap. Whatever it is that's going to help you reset, because you have to reset. You have to take a moment to reset.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you have a great deal of self-awareness to where you can kind of catch yourself in those moments before it gets too far gone. How did you develop that self-awareness? I mean, that's something that not all of us have sharpened that skill set, because oftentimes we're knee deep in the emotion and the stress of it all, and we let that kind of consume us. How did you learn when to take a break, and how did you get to a place where you could acknowledge okay, I'm in too deep. I need to take a step back?
You know, my relationship with God has always been the foundation. I met him in a really dramatic way at 16, and literally overnight changed the trajectory of my life. And at that initial meeting, I just developed this trust and this belief and this understanding sort of how, I don't hear him audibly, but the Spirit, the Holy Spirit just speaks to me all the time. And so as I started down this journey, now I have also been on an intense caretaking journey for 10 years. It's been a long, long journey with no end in sight. Mental illness is a cycle, and we're about to go into another part of the cycle. And so it's time. But more than time, it's when you get into a circumstance. For instance, let me give you a pretty dramatic example. My husband's mental illness turned into angry blame towards me. And so he would scream at me, he would yell at me, he would say things like, well, if you'd get your life together, my life would be perfect. And, I'm the reason why he's in this shape. And there's a lot of reasons why I've worked out that that's happened. And I don't have time to go into all of those. But from the beginning, I just knew the truth. And the truth was, I didn't cause it, but I did make a vow to love, honor, and cherish in sickness and in health. And God just kept bringing me back to that. So one day I'm in the garage, I'm having a pity party. I'm yelling at God because I'm just not happy and things are not going well and I can't fix it. And I looked over to the left and there's a workbench, and we live with our kids now because of the situation. Mm-hmm. So I grabbed this roll of blue painter's tape and a tape measure, and I measured out a 3 foot by 3 foot block, square on the ground and taped it off in this blue tape. And nobody's home except my husband was in the house. And I am yelling at the top of my voice. And I often wonder if neighbors walked by and could hear there's a crazy woman in that house. But I was just telling God, do you see this? Do you see this square? This is this. And I'm like making these wide gestures. This is not fair. And my life has fallen apart. And what are you going to do? I mean, I'm really just kind of letting it all out. And so then when I got the square finished, I looked up at the sky or the ceiling of the garage and I pointed and I said, do you see this square? I am going to step into this square. And when I step into this square, I am quitting. You are going to have to take care of everything else outside this square because I can't handle it. I don't know what to do. And I literally stepped into the square. And the minute I did, I felt the Holy Spirit say to me, it's about time. You cannot fix this, Carole. And you think that you are fixing it, hurting it, whatever. You need to just trust me and you will know what to do in the next minute. And all of a sudden, I realized that there's this mindset that we have that we are responsible and we're going to take care of the problem. We do one of two things. We either lean into it and try to be in control or we run away. And I work with people all the time, caregivers all the time who quit, who just say, I didn't sign up for this. And on the inside, when I try to say that, God says, oh, yeah, you did. Oh, yeah, you did. And I'm saying every situation is different. But for me, that blue tape box therapy that I developed that day in the garage has served me well. Because I mentally step into a blue tape box when I start to feel like I'm in control, because I'm not.
That's right.
I'm not.
No, we're not. Ultimately, no, we're not. Oh my goodness. That's funny how such a simple thing like that could be so transformative, but it definitely opened your eyes to God was like, nope, I got this. I will give you the strength you need to get through this. And we may not understand it, but my goodness, Carole, this is amazing. Talk to us a little bit about some of the, you provide a lot of wisdom to caretakers on a daily basis. I can only imagine, but share some of the wisdom that you're bringing to others who maybe are just kind of at their wits' end and just feel like they can't go on anymore. What do you tell them to encourage them or to give them guidance?
Well, I think every one of us as caregivers needs a therapist. We either need a therapist or a coach. And I probably could, and they serve two different purposes. I know some incredible coaches. I actually am a mental health coach. And I did that study and I got that certificate because I wanted to understand how to help caregivers. I knew what I was doing for me, but I don't want to ever go into a world or an arena where I'm going to say something that's not correct. What I've discovered is every situation is unique and we all need someone to talk to, whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist. And I have chosen to stay in the therapy role. So I have had a counselor for 8 years who just retired, and I'm actually I have actually had my first appointment with a new one. Which in trying to find one was like a train wreck, but God just gave me the right person to help me. I think we need to be willing to open our mouths and talk. Some of the wisdom that I have gleaned is this is a marathon. We've heard this before, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. This is going to be a lifelong marathon with my husband. And for however long he is alive, he's going to continue to struggle. And so I can't live like life is ever going to be any different. Now, I also realize that it's a cycle. And when we realize that it's a cycle, sometimes it's going to be worse, sometimes it's going to be better. And then you pick and choose how you're going to respond. And then I've also realized we cannot live in what we call a perfection mentality because we're never going to get it right. And then finally, the other thing that I learned that probably has had the greatest impact on me is that I can live with the fear of what is going to happen with my husband. Is he going to struggle again? Is he going to get depressed again? Is he going to become so? Is he going to have to go into a hospital? You know, I can live with this fear that might happen, but I don't have to live in the fear. And there's a difference, because living with the fear, if I'm living in the fear, then I'm trying to pre-live, I'm trying to control, I'm trying to solve, which I can't do any of those. But when I'm living with the fear, I know it's there, but I'm not there yet. Or if I am there yet, what do I need to do in this moment? And sometimes it's as simple and as hard as take a deep breath. Okay, what am I going to do right now? Okay, take a deep breath. What am I going to do right now? And I kind of, in my mind, think of it as standing on the beach, looking out into the ocean and seeing a tidal wave coming, because that's what it feels like when it hits you, is that you're being drowned by a tidal wave. And if I'm standing on the beach and I see the tidal wave coming, I don't know actually when the tidal wave is going to get here or if it's going to get here. But I can start living like the tidal wave is here already, which means I'm actually impacting everybody in my world of influence at that moment. Or I can say, yeah, it looks like there's a tidal wave coming, but right now in this moment, how am I going to respond?
That's great wisdom. I love that. Many of our listeners here at Covenant Eyes on our podcast, a lot of them are going through addiction recovery to pornography. And so often there are spouses that really are kind of on the journey of caretaking as someone is in addiction, because, you know, that person's life is completely destroyed and they're working to rebuild, and it's a lifelong journey. So I can imagine a lot of our listeners will relate a lot to what you've shared today. But in the work that you do you find, you know, people that are caretaking, those with addictions, and do they experience the same kind of hurts and hopes and fears and different things that you've experienced in your journey with the mental health journey that your husband's been on?
That's so interesting, Karen, because in the last couple of years that I've been sort of doing research, I would say that part of my problem comes, and I've not actually, this is the first time kind of I'm saying this out loud to a group of people, but my therapist and I were working really hard on the understanding that one of my husband's problems is very much like an addiction, because he has control issues.
Okay.
And so he has an addiction to being in control. And if things are not in his control, then he has to make them in control.
Okay.
Or he cannot handle it. If he has a neck ache, there has to be an answer to why. And that is this need for control. Now, it seems strange because we don't look at that in the same way we look at it as an addiction to pornography or an addiction to drugs or alcohol. But it really is this need. To me, that's what an addiction is. An addiction is something that pulls us so hard into it that we now become trapped by whatever that need or whatever it is. And we have to stop it. And he has never been able to stop it. And so I can actually see the symptoms of it before he actually falls totally into it again. And so I kind of think that we need to understand I'll just say for me, because I can't even imagine, like, I have some family members who are alcoholics. My dad was an abusive alcoholic. I know what that looks like. I have family members who have been drug addicts. I mean, and even as a caregiver, there's a danger when we start feeling overwhelmed that we can fall into that. I'm not kidding you. I mean, I fall into, I'm going to open up a bag of potato chips. I know I don't need it. I know my trainer says don't eat it, But when I get up and I go, and I'm not trying to make light of an addiction, but I mean, we tend to want to take away the pain, and what is going to take away the pain?
Right.
And so for me, it's understanding every moment. It's like we have to really understand why we do what we do. I'm finishing up a 31-day series on my podcast. I'm not big on New Year's resolutions. When January 1st came around, I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not making a resolution. I'm going to read my Bible every day. And then, what's the most, I always joke about what's the most well-read scripture in the Bible, Genesis 1:1, because on January 1st, we always start there. And then by the end of the month, we're like off track, especially if you're a caregiver. But I didn't want to do it, New Year's resolution. So I found a different word. Means the same thing, but so I'm doing a 31-day Caretakers Resolve Challenge.
Okay.
And the resolves are every single day, what can I resolve to do today? And I'll give you a little teaser. I don't know when this is gonna air, but January 31st, I've already written, and January 31st is go back to the beginning and start over at resolve number 1, because we're on a journey.
Yeah.
And things like recognizing burnout in our lives, things like how can we help getting help for finding a way to help our loved one. One of them is don't fall into the danger of eating or drinking to make yourself feel better, because then all of a sudden we've created a problem for ourselves that now we have to deal with. Right. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point too. Like often as caretakers, we can fall trapped to our own, whether it's addictions or just bad habits or things that really lure us in. And then we end up having to need a caretaker at some point because we get sucked in. So talk to me a little bit about, as we're bringing this episode to a close, I want to be able to share with our listeners, where they can find out more about your ministry, how they can learn, if they're a caretaker, about strategies to do the work well, because it's hard work and I don't think it ever gets recognized nearly enough.
So they can find me. My website is thecaretakersjourney.com. And you can reach me at Carole with an E, Carole, at thecaretakersjourney.com. And the podcast is called The Caretaker's Journey Podcast. I just wanted to keep everything there. My ministry for many, many years was Carole's Journey. So if they just search Carole's Journey or The Caretaker's Journey, they'll find me. I think that the strategies I try to do through my ministry are, I do a lot of interviews. I discovered so many incredible books and so many people who are walking this journey or who are trying to help us walk this journey. We did a 4-week episode with a mental health professional out of Oklahoma. And the thing he covered we covered a different subject each week for 4 weeks last year. And we talked about what it is in the church and just becoming aware. I think we just need to just reach out. I mean, reach out to me. If you are a caretaker and you are overwhelmed, you can email me. It doesn't take, I got a text message from someone a couple of weeks ago, a young woman in New Jersey, I think. And she said, I heard your podcast. I Googled it. I found your podcast. And then I started chasing you down the rabbit hole and stalking you on social media. And I found your phone number. And I just wanted to text you and say, thank you. I care
That's
for my
awesome.
mom. And today's podcast helped me. It's like, okay, wow. God, and I had recorded that particular podcast. She said today's podcast, but I had recorded that like 4 or 5 months before.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the beauty of technology, is there is so much that's good, but we have to wait out so much that's not good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for what you do to serve caretakers. I think being a caretaker is probably something that all of us experience at some point in our life, whether we realize it or not. And Sometimes it's for long seasons of our life, depending on where God puts you. And it really takes a strong, courageous person to take on the role of caretaker. And I'm just so grateful that you're out there and you're supporting people and teaching them and just providing community and connection and education, because it is sometimes it feels like a lonely journey. So thank you, Carole. I appreciate it for everything you're doing.
Oh, Karen, thank you so much.
Of course, of course. And to all of our listeners, we will put all of those links in our show notes so that you can easily reach out to Carole and her work and her ministry. Check out her podcast, and definitely leave us some feedback too on the episode. We look forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carole. It's been a joy to talk to you and learn more about the work that you're doing. We wish you well. And that brings today's episode to a close, listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Covenant Eyes podcast. Take care. God bless.